Good evening, everyone. This is the Ward 1 annual meeting this fall. Welcome to their presentation. We're happy to have you here. Unfortunately, we have to do it by Zoom. It'd be nicer to be over at Gorton and seeing everybody in person, but nevertheless, we look forward to showing a lot of information tonight and give you an opportunity to ask questions. But before we start, I wanted to introduce my other Ward 1 alderman who has just started this year, Jennifer Karras. Jennifer's there on the screen. She's been in Lake Forest for 18 years with her husband, Michael, and their 3 children. They're all attending Lake Forest public schools, although probably remotely, I would guess, Jennifer. She's had a 25-year career in brand marketing and strategy and media relations and corporate communications. So she's been a senior managing director and head of brand marketing communications at Guggenheim Partners. Jennifer's been actively involved in our community and been chairman of the Corolla Board, vice chairman of communications for the Lake Forest High School Foundation, president of the Deerpath Middle School APT, and she's continuing to consult with marketing clients in both the business and nonprofit sectors. She went to Ithaca College and earned her bachelor's degree there, and then went on to study government affairs at American University. So maybe Jennifer, you want to say hello to everybody?
Thank you, Jed, so much. I just want to say I'm really honored to be following in the footsteps of Prue Beidler and working alongside you, of course, and our fellow aldermen and Mayor Pantaleone and City Manager Jason Riches. So I really feel fortunate to have the opportunity to serve the residents of our ward and working on the marketing program that the mayor has asked me to oversee. So we'll get into those slides a little bit later, but thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome. As I say, we have quite a few slides. We're going to split the presentation. I'm going to start with some financial information, and then Jennifer's going to talk about our community and the marketing of our community. But as we have in the past, there's opportunity for questions as we go. You'll note in the screen that there's a Q&A button where you can click that and ask a question. Our city manager, Wisher, will be taking those, and at the end of the presentation, we'll take those on. So he'll be the reminder for the questions. But you can also call, we have a call-in number, and you'll see that later in the presentation. But it's 847-810-3643. So we'll be happy to take those questions at the conclusion. So why don't we go ahead with the first slide. So I'm going to start with a lot of information about city finances. You'll see on the slide that we've had a balanced budget in fiscal 21, and that's just despite all of the COVID and pandemic impacts. We were quite concerned at the beginning of March that this was going to be a difficult year, given all of the uncertainties arranged about the financial impact of the epidemic. But you'll see in a little bit that we're doing pretty well. We've retained our AAA bond rating with Moody's, and that was as a result of also our bond refinancing, which we did last year. And our finance department went out and got a loan of $18 million at 1.75%, which will save us about $1.3 million in interest over that lifetime. So that's been good. We have very strong reserves. We're very happy about that. It insulates us from a lot of unknowns. So we're very careful about preserving those. And we've also been very proactive about pension costs for our police and fire staff. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have a very strong capital investment program. We're looking very carefully at all of the different needs for our capital. From equipment to street improvements to building improvements, all across the board. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on that, but we'll talk about that later in the presentation, including the Burr Oak storm sewer, which you may not know Burr Oak, but it's that area north of the Crystal Point condominiums along Western. So we'll talk about that later in the presentation. So next slide, please. So one of the things I want to mention is that there's a lot of financial information in this discussion tonight. Our finance director, Holub, has been very good about putting financial information out on our website. And we feel very proud of the financial transparency that we've been able to create in the website. If you go to the next slide, for those of you who have been to the website, you'll notice up in the upper right-hand corner that quick links. If that drop down, if you go to that, you'll see the financial transparency click. And that will take you into a whole range of options for drilling down in lots of different ways across all aspects of the financial profile for the community. You can graph things, chart things, do analytical analysis with the information there. So it's very detailed. I'd be surprised if you don't find what you're looking for there. But if you don't, let me know. Let Jennifer know. All right, let's try the next slide. So this is our total budget for this year. We have a number of funds, and we'll talk about those in a second, but of all the different funds, the general fund, the water fund, the parks and rec fund, our total budget, wall to wall, is approximately $87 million. And it's offset by approximately $87 million in expenses. You'll see property taxes for all of our funds are the primary source of revenue for us. And on the other side, you'll see that salary and compensation is the big expense item for us. A lot of that is governed by our contracts with the public safety members of the staff, as well as other staff in public works and other parts of the city operations. So we manage that very carefully, but a lot of it's things that are pretty fixed. Why don't you go to the next slide? So as I mentioned, the general fund, the general fund is where all of our typical operations are happening. So you can see it's almost $36 million. So of the $87 million that you saw, 36 million is in the general fund. And in that area, you can see that the property taxes are predominantly the source of funding, but you can see how it breaks out across all of the other sources of funding. And this was an area where we were concerned about what was going to happen with the pandemic. So we'll talk about that, because there are 3 or 4 areas that potentially could have been impacted by falling revenue due to the pandemic. And on the expense side, general fund, you'll see again, salaries and wages, compensation is the bulk of our expense. We don't have a slide this year showing the ratio of employees to households in the community, but it's been falling pretty steadily for about 12 to 15 years. So it's quite a bit lower than, maybe even half is what it was 12 to 15 years ago. So we're doing, I think, quite a good job at that. All right, next slide. So if you look at the general fund, we blew this up for you so you could look at the expenses by department. Again, you can see the police, 31%. The fire rescue team is 21%. And public works, which obviously takes care of our streets and all of the public areas that we travel on. And then obviously the parks and rec department take care of a lot of the landscaping and care of our public parks. So that's where the bulk of our money goes every year. Okay, next slide. So here again, we are by department, and not too much different. Again, public works, police, fire, parks and recreation, and then all of the other smaller slices of the pie. So again, those are all out on the website in the financial transparency. And you can drill down into each of these and look at all of their expenses by line item. So I encourage you to try and do that if you need more details. Okay, new line, new site. On our pension fund, I think people know that the state legislature is the one who governs our public safety pension funds. They set the benefits. And so as we as a community are responsible for funding those. And we have a Pension Subcommittee that I'm part of, and the mayor and former Alderman Tim Newman. And we've been working with our Director of Finance, Director Holub, on alternative ways of treating our pension obligations. We need to increase the funding level. We'd like to get it up to about 80% of the liabilities in terms of assets. And to do that, we're going to take a different approach than the state. The state would have required us to go on that blue line heading up to the upper right. But because they said we could, they needed to reach that 90% funding level by 2041. But we decided to take a different tact and do a rolling 15-year window. It's a little complicated, but what it enables us to do is once that red line crosses the blue line, we can shoot for 80% funding over a 15-year rolling window and go forward so that future residents are also paying for the pensions as well as current residents. So that's why I've circled that inflection point. That'll enable us to keep the contributions to the pension fund stable well into the future. The other thing we've done is we've taken a more conservative approach to our actuarial assumptions, which is what determines how much we have to fund. Last year, early in the year, we were at a assumed 7% return on our investments. We subsequently reduced that to 6.75. And most recently, we've reduced it again to 6.5% as the assumed rate of return. That increases our contributions, but we wanted to do that to be more conservative, make sure that we could have a shot at that 80% funding level. You can see all of this on the website and look at the details out there. So let me try the next slide. So property tax is something everybody looks at pretty closely, and we do get comments about it. But this slide is showing you that, again, our Lake Forest residents have the lowest property tax rate in Lake County. And we're proud of that. We think that that's an important aspect of our community. And I think we're able to run quite a good operation with that particular tax rate. Let's go to the next slide. So again, this is another way of saying that our rate is low. This is a comparison of property taxes as a percent of home value. And you can see again, we're down at the bottom of all of these other surrounding communities. We think this is something we're quite proud of. We'll go to the next slide. So in this case, we always have this every year. We've been targeting a typical $800,000 home, which, and you'll see when Jennifer talks about our community and what's going on in the real estate market, this is a little bit lower than perhaps average, but I think representative. And you can see how our tax rate puts us in comparison to all of these other surrounding towns. And again, down at the bottom of the property tax burden on homeowners. Okay, next slide. People often comment about property taxes and why are they as high as they are? Well, a good portion of that is due to other taxing bodies. The city's percentage of the tax bill we receive is 22%, but you can see that the other parts, the school district 67 and district 115, are about half of your tax bill. Lake County is 11%, and various other parts of the county are that remaining 12%. So we control the part we can control, but we obviously can't control these other aspects of the bill. But just wanted to make sure everybody understood where our participation in that assessment goes. Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning of our talk about the financials that we were quite worried about what would happen to our budget for the various parts of the budget that are funded from areas that are sensitive to the pandemic. And you can see up in the up part of the graph there, the revenue year to date. You'll see the general fund, the park and recreations, golf, and motor fuel tax. So you can see where we thought it would be and where it's coming out. Pretty similar to what we thought. Even you would say, well, maybe the golf would be down, but the golf group has done a terrific job. Director Swartha has done a great job at parks and recreation. So the whole team has done a nice job of keeping up with it. And if you look at I won't go through all these line items, but a couple that stand out, you'll see down in the middle, recreation program fees. That's down by almost $500,000, but Director Swartha has managed her cost structure so that she's able to keep even, and that's that graph up above. You can see the golf courses actually come out ahead of where they were. One of the big things is the additional $1 million from our real estate transfer tax, and Jennifer will be talking about this in a little bit about what's going on with the home values in the marketplace in Lake Forest. So those are the 4 areas that have had quite a unexpected results. Maybe just up at the top, the income tax also, you probably didn't know it, but unemployment benefits are taxed in Illinois. So we expected to be coming out on the short end of income tax and revenue sharing. But as you can see, it's come out okay so far. So next slide. Again, this is a detailed slide. I'm not going to go through all of it, but these are all the different programs that have been available to us and to the city staff to try and get additional funding from a whole variety of sources that will help us in our financial management. And you'll see in that red, the CARES COVID relief, that we received a grant of $630,000 that came through Lake County for our general fund. So again, things like that have helped quite a bit. And we're going to continue to pursue all of these to see what additional support we can get from all the different agencies that are available to us. So far, so good. I think it's up to going over to Jennifer now, maybe a new slide. And we're going to let Jennifer talk about our real estate market, which is going gangbusters. But Jennifer, there you go.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jed. It is going gangbusters. So the real estate market in Lake Forest, the residential real estate market, it's really started to come alive in late May. More than 450 single-family homes are expected to close by the end of 2020, which is really remarkable. Starting to see signs of appreciation. And I thought I'd give you just a little sense of where this movement is coming from. Roughly 60% of home buyers are relocating from the city, while about 40% have reevaluated where they live in nearby suburbs and decided that Lake Forest offers a better place to live for a variety of reasons, ranging from the excellence, the Lake Forest High School's reputation of excellence, the property value, given lower property taxes that Jed referred to, and getting more home and land for what they could in nearby areas. The city's also seeing some interesting movement within Lake Forest. So empty nesters and snowbirds are selling bigger homes and downsizing, into some of the condominiums and other projects that you see coming up around the area. So these are just some figures. What's really interesting on this slide is that we're almost $1 million ahead of budget projections for the real estate transfer tax, which is really quite remarkable. Next slide. So the mayor, when I joined council, the mayor asked me to spearhead the continuation of the marketing efforts that Prue had started about 3 years ago. So I was delighted to take on that assignment. I'm just going to give you a sense, overview of what we're up to. There's a number of things that we would like to address. One of the first things that I did was put together a committee very talented residents and some people who work in Lake Forest and know the city extremely well. So we've had a couple of meetings, one in person and one virtually. So what we're looking at as a committee, and then we have a smaller working group, is to position Lake Forest as one of the very best places to live at every stage of life. To leverage in terms of our stories and positioning, to leverage the city's history, its beauty, its many features, the organization, and again, sort of the human aspects of Lake Forest. And putting that into some vehicles, we're going to create some new vehicles to better communicate our story. And of course, ultimately grow the interest in living here, shopping and dining in Lake Forest, and enjoying the many outdoor features that we have. Next. So we talked about, we've established a marketing committee, which is in place. I'm very excited. We just recently added 2 new people to that group. We are retaining a creative partner, which we're, I think, on the verge of contracting. We are hiring a graphic designer as an intern, and then another potential intern from Lake Forest College who will collaborate with us and doing a number of writing projects. We have a digital marketing campaign that will get underway in the next week or so. And that is designed to capitalize on all of the enthusiasm for the real estate market in Lake Forest, and really trying to capture mind share if they're exploring possibilities, community possibilities. We just want to make sure that Lake Forest is in front of them when they're thinking through that decision. Of course, we also want to be doing everything that we can to support our business community, particularly during this difficult period, this environment where there are a lot of unknowns. And so we developed with the Chamber of Commerce, an advertisement that's going to run in Forest and Bluff publication in November and December, and drive them to this new landing page that's called Lake Forest Love. Ultimately, Lake Forest Love will become a new blog where we will begin to tell stories about Lake Forest, so we can really sort of shape the perception of Lake Forest very deliberately the way that we want to be perceived. And then we're also using new creative images and videos. We have a lot of footage that was used for the Welcome Home campaign, so we're going to recast some of that video in some of our new marketing materials. There's a little logo up here called Lake Forest Station, and that is for a pop-up shop that we are planning to open sometime next month, hopefully right before Thanksgiving. It is a pop-up shop that is going to highlight the nonprofits throughout Lake Forest and give them an opportunity to sell branded merchandise, high quality branded merchandise, and to raise their visibility. It'll also be a place where we're going to develop a collection of limited edition merchandise that's branded Lake Forest in 60045. So stay tuned for that, but we're very excited. I think that the presence of having this pop-up shop will be a lot of fun for the community. We'll also eventually get into electronic survey probably next month to gather impressions and perspectives about Lake Forest from a variety of key markets or audiences. Next slide. Thank you. So again, some other things that we want to move into, in our after we have gone through some of these initial activities. We want to build a coalition of Lake Forest organizations so it's more cohesive and we work together. There are a lot of different places that are serving Lake Forest residents, and we just make sure that we're communicating and meeting on a regular basis. We're going to start an ambassadors program. And look to redesign the dialogue, which is published quarterly, and we would like to redesign that. So again, it gives us a place for some more content. We're looking at doing some more community events on the west side of Lake Forest, as well as the east side, but that of course remains to be seen. And we're hoping that we can maybe have some things planned that will take place by next summer. Next. So South Park dates back to the 1930s and spans across 12 acres. The past weekend, the community celebrated the park's grand reopening following a 3-year planning and renovation project. The project was completed within budget and on schedule. Half of those funds came through a matching grant from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And it took the construction part took about 6 months, which is really just an incredibly short period of time to produce what it looks like today. So if anybody hasn't been over to South Park, it happens to be in my neighborhood. So after living here for 20 years, we haven't had a park like this. And we are just, the whole neighborhood is just delighted with all of its new features. There's new tennis courts, there's basketball court and pickleball, and there's this walkway that goes around the perimeter that's pretty exceptional. There's a fitness area, there's new parking. So it's actually, the park is pretty spectacular. So shout out to Director Sally Swarthout and Chuck Myers for overseeing this extraordinary new project for our community. I think the next slide has some of those features. So there's some pictures. The bottom picture was taken over the weekend, and so was the top picture, actually. Okay, next. The rec center had to really, under Director Swarthout's leadership, rethought how to serve the community. The solution was a virtual recreation center and programming that has been very successful and well received among Lake Forest residents, and even some offerings attracted participants from outside of the state. So that was interesting to see. And I'm sure that they'll want to continue to connect if we have virtual offerings going forward. The Deerpath golf course Jed mentioned has seen an extremely successful season, even stronger than last year. Outdoor patio has been open since July and will remain open for lunch through November. And the golf course is still recording strong bookings on good weather days. The beach, So the beach opened Memorial Day weekend with a trained team of certified lifeguards in place, and Kemper opened and operated the Shore Club in the North Pavilion. A few additional notes about the recreation programming. Camps filled up and were able to accommodate, the rec department was able to accommodate everyone who wanted to participate. So there was great demand for camps this summer. The sailing program, which served hundreds of kids, actually still had a waiting list. The city installed a new fleet of 21 new 420E sailboats, which is a race boat built for scholastic sailing that's also used for Learn to Sail programs. And the purchase of those new boats was funded entirely from private donations. Kinderhaven opened with a full set of classrooms. Each classroom had a total of 10 or less students, or I guess it's some progress that they have 10 or less students. And they those students in the classroom stay in a designated pod to keep everybody safe. Also, the flag football, touch football youth programs that are extremely popular are taking place. The recreation department expanded the number of teams to accommodate program demand. For all programs, prior to practice, participants go through a health screening. And lastly, on recreation, Croya is open and has also adapted its programming to continue to support the hundreds of students it serves in grades 7 through 12 from Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. The organization marked its 40th anniversary this past summer, and a special commemorative book is being printed now and will be available to the public. We have the leaders of the 2 middle schools, Lake Bluff Middle School and Lake Forest Middle School, and the high school, that will be distributing the book through a electronic. It'll be a link to the book on the Croya website. So everybody will receive it digitally, and if anybody's interested in a hard copy of the book, they can receive one by emailing Croya. Next slide. So the gas lights are interesting. The city maintains almost 400 gas lights across the city that were installed in the 1800s and later converted to gas. In 2018, the city began the process of converting the lights from gas to electric with LED bulbs, which have a life of 8 to 10 years. So the conversion will save the city about $50,000 a year. And the conversion project, which is still underway, will continue at a pace of about 50 lights a year through the year 2025. And I think even though we're converting them to electric, I think I'm going to hope that we continue to call them gas lights, because that's how the city has referred to them for many, 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 many years. So I'm hoping that that's the case. All right, let's move on to the beach. Okay, that's the glass slide. So maybe, Jed, this is the sustainability slides. So
Yeah.
back to you, Jed.
Okay, these little circles just show where they're doing the light renovation or replacement. We're going to talk a little bit about environmental sustainability. In this earlier this year, the mayor established a standing committee of the city council on environmental sustainability. In the past, we've done a lot of environmental things, but it hasn't been as coordinated across all the departments and across the city as perhaps we could have done. So it made sense to establish the committee to help structure our programs and responses to environmental issues. And so this past year, since January, we've been working with a consulting firm, firm called MIST, M-I-S-T, to develop processes for vetting our environmental programs. And we've been identifying sustainability goals that we think are appropriate for the community, and what kinds of initiatives we think should be undertaken. And we have currently a project that's underway where the city is committed to participation in a private sector solar program where the firm is selling us electricity from their solar farm. The city's participating in it, and we're about to make that available to residents in the city so that you can purchase not all, but some of your electrical power through the solar program. And you may have seen the Bart the Cart recycling campaign that's been initiated. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's been pretty effective, and we're hoping that you've seen the difference in terms of how this community is thinking about recycling. So maybe go to the next slide and we'll talk about that. You may have seen that the Lake Forest Garden Club gave the city $110,000, a marvelous gift, and it's for education around recycling. And the goal is to reduce our contamination in our recycling bins from 25% to 10%. When we talk about contamination, when you put your recycling bin out on the street, it needs to meet certain standards. And those standards are actually on the inside lid of your recycling can. There are 4 areas, and you'll see this off to the right, 1, 2, 3, and 4 things that can't be in there, but there are 4 things that can be. And look inside at that sticker, because we get audited our trash on a quarterly basis. They take a truckload each quarter and they look at it for contamination for food and these other things that you see on the right. And we've been able, in the short time we've been doing the recycling campaign, we've been able to reduce our contamination from 25% down to 19%, but we're heading to 10. But that's going to give us a $50,000 savings because right now recycling that product in those containers actually costs more for the city than it does to send it to the landfill. We're doing it because this is the right thing to do. We don't want to send it to the landfill if we can help it. We'd like to see it recycled, but it needs to be properly disposed of when you take it out of your house and put it in the recycling container. So take a look at the inside of your recycling container. Okay, next slide. So one of the things we're looking at is electrification of our fleet. And our first venture into this is working with the fire department, and Director Thomas has been able to source a SUV, the standard Ford SUV that the police departments use. We have a picture of the police department here, but it's actually going to be for the fire department. It's a hybrid SUV that will reduce fuel costs by, we think, about $6,000. And Director Thomas said that he thinks he can acquire our first hybrid SUV for the fire department at a little bit over about, I think you said $3,500 above what it would have cost for just a gasoline powered SUV. So we're going to continue to see if we can replace our traditional vehicles and some of the trucks with hybrid and electrical vehicles. And we think that will be ongoing for quite a while. I don't think we have a slide for this, but we also are going to look at, as we resurface some of our parking lots, we want to install electric power stations for people who want to maybe are parking there to go to the park, or I don't think many people are going on the train at the moment, but they can charge their electric vehicles in our parking lot. So we're going to hope to have an experimental program. We'll work on this at our next meeting on the 9th to start putting electric power stations in our parking lots for electrical vehicles to use. Okay, why don't you go to the next slide. This is the Deerpath Streetscape, and the reason I bring it up, it's there to help improve the street itself, what it looks like, but more importantly, it's an important element in our stormwater. You probably can't see it very well, but we can plant quite a few trees now on Deerpath, because underneath those trees and underneath the sidewalk will be a kind of a retention basin where the trees will be planted in soil. Stormwater runoff from the street and sidewalks flows down into a retention area, and the trees are able to use that to sustain themselves. So we get a return on improved stormwater management and better vegetative support for the trees on the street. So that's one example of the things we're doing. We're down in the next few slides, we'll talk about our work in the ravines, and I'm going to ask Director Thomas to comment on what we're doing there in terms of stormwater. But these are examples of where we hopefully turn problems into solutions that are environmentally attractive. So new slide. I'm going to turn this back to Jennifer and let her talk about our beach situation.
So everybody's aware that every year the city conducts a spring cleaning to re-level the beach following a winter of wind, snow, and cold, which we usually have. This year, however, was unlike all other years. High lake levels and winds out of the east hammered the beach this year. Sand covered the grass and part of the parking lot, and trash of all sorts washed up on the shore. Sand from cells 1 and 2. I think maybe does the next slide have the cells? You see if the next slide has those? Yeah, thank you. So sand from cells 1 and 2 moved all the way because of those winds to cells 3 and 4, and the water came up to the seat wall. The city worked to recreate the beach in cell 2. It literally was washed away, and all in all moved about 5,000 cubic yards of sand from cell 4 to cells 1 and 2 by renting large equipment and working 12 hours straight to get the job done. We are experiencing historical lake levels. To prevent exposure of this seat wall over this coming winter, the city has installed 400 feet of trap bags that are linked together in front of the seat wall of cells 1 and 2 to prevent exposure. Staff's also creating 6 to 8 feet tall sand berms as another defense mechanism. Since 1908, the Army Corps of Engineers has been tracking the water levels. The last 3 years, the levels have really gone up. Staff is currently reviewing options for long-term strategy to protect the seat wall and walkway, particularly a critical area of about 400 feet that's of greatest risk of exposure. So I know the staff is going to be presenting that to council in the coming month. And then the Bluff Study, I think everybody's aware that there was stabilization of the bluff at both ends of Forest Park on the north end and the south end was completed, and now we're been monitoring the middle portion. The city hired an engineering firm to monitor movement of the bluff, which has already detected some movement along the middle section. There's a mechanism currently in place to monitor soil movement, but staff will recommend the installation of a second mechanism to monitor the moisture as well. It's vitally important the city has the ability to monitor both the soil and the water to anticipate potential issues with the bluff. A feasibility study that staff will propose next month will outline a stabilization plan and provide costs for capital planning. Next slide. That's back to you.
Back to me. Okay. Well, you probably remember the sewer project, storm sewer project that we did last summer along Old Elm, where you couldn't actually travel from either direction across Old Elm. That was completed and it's been, I think, pretty successful given the problems that we're experiencing by homeowners in that whole area there. I think they found it a lot of relief. There's also the East Skokie Ditch drainage ditch project that's being completed by folks outside of Lake Forest. It's probably responsibility of another district. But I mentioned the Burr Oak storm sewer project. We're going to talk about that in a minute in a little more detail, but that's the neighborhoods across from the high school, across the railroad tracks and north of the Crystal Point condominiums, where they are facing continuing storm water problems in their basements. So we have a project for that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the other project I'm going to talk about is Deerpath in 41, which you probably have seen almost on an annual basis now for the last 3 or 4 years, where the underpass floods. So why don't we go to the next slide and we'll look at these in a little more detail. So as I mentioned, I was going to ask Director Thomas to talk about the Ravines. The Ravines are a Ward 1 issue. Probably 90% or more are owned privately, where the two property owners, their property extends down to the base of the Ravines. And the city owns the remainder, but we feel an obligation to try and not only maintain, but perhaps upgrade the ravine habitat so that it doesn't deteriorate any further than it already has. But Director Thomas, if you're on the DS here, maybe you could talk about these specific projects.
Great, thank you, Chairman Morris and Alderman Karras. Good evening, residents of the First Ward. As the Alderman mentioned, we have got multiple ravine projects that we have lined up for the future. These, along with all of our capital projects, are reviewed on an annual basis with the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee will have the challenge of determining which projects will move forward, whether they are storm sewer, ravine, bridge, street. But specifically with ravines, we completed a project this year on Rosemary, and we have budgeted or are requesting funding for a project on Ringwood, very similar to the ravine work that we did on Rosemary this year, just east of Sheridan Road. But again, the project needs to be considered with many other projects coming up here in a couple of weeks. In addition, the Seminary Ravine, we are proposing to do a study on that the next fiscal year, and then jump into potentially some design work for the Rockefeller and Lock Ravines and the storm sewer outfalls with those ravines. Those are the ravine projects that we have lined up. We have more lined up in the future, but for now, quite frankly, that's a lot to get done. So, Chairman Morris.
Okay, very good. Now don't go away, because let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about the Burr Oak storm sewer project. We originally tried to do this earlier in the prior fiscal year, but the cost of remediating this area and their stormwater turned out to be a lot more expensive than we thought. Part of the reason is that the drainage has to go from there under the railroad tracks, past the high school and up to a ravine area in Lake Bluff. And when we actually got the engineering estimates back, they were quite a bit higher than we expected. So Director Thomas went back and we've come up with we think an innovative solution that will be our kind of mini deep tunnel project under Western. But Director Thomas, maybe you could describe how this is going to work.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The area in question again is up near the condominiums on Northwestern Avenue. Stormwater basically from Green Bay Road, and then if we go over to Western from Franklin north to Alden Lane, that area, that stormwater all drains to the east. And as we've noted, it drains under one storm sewer, a 36-inch pipe. Under the railroad tracks, it actually makes its way under a storm sewer past East Campus and empties out in a ravine on Willow that actually goes behind the homes on Ravine Park. That ravine eventually goes into Lake Bluff, in past Ravine Forest, down Moffett, and into the lake. So this solution, and it's new for us. Other towns have done a few of these, primarily Glenview and Northbrook, but it's called a storm trap. And what it essentially does is we will be upsizing the storm sewer pipes on Burr Oak, on Thomas, on Alden, as well as Franklin. When we have heavy rains and all that water can't get under that 136-inch pipe under the tracks, this actually will detain the water and will actually hold on to the storm water. And this particular storm trap will be placed under Western Avenue. If you're familiar with Western Avenue, where the smaller commercial area is, where the Shaggy Dog is at, essentially they're working southward, both lanes of Western Avenue to where Western begins to curve. The storm trap itself will hold approximately 800,000 gallons. And when that 36-inch pipe under the tracks slows down and can handle additional flow, there will be a float system on this mechanism, and it will automatically turn on, and we'll go ahead and pump the water and let it then make its way to the ravines. So that is the way that we're going to improve the storm drainage in that area. It also has a benefit in that it will control, because we won't have such heavy flows for such a heavy long period of time, the water going into the ravine on Willow and Ravine Park. That will, again, we can manage when those flows arrive at that point and at what rate they're entering too. So that's a good summary of the Burr Oak Storm Sewer Project.
Great. Well, let's go to the next project, our next slide, and we'll talk about a little bit about the cost. So here it is, 5.2 million, but the city manager and the staff working with Mike Rummel, who's in Lake County on their the commission at Lake County Board of Supervisors. They have a grant program, and together they were able to get a grant application to fund 50% of the cost of this. So it's going to save the city quite a bit of money. And we're looking forward to this project beginning in the spring. Thanks to the staff and the hard work on this. It's a very creative project, and one I think will be maybe something we can duplicate in other parts of the city if needed. The other slide, next slide, is something else that Director Thomas and the city staff have been working on. This is a familiar picture that people have seen in the media, which is the Deerpath underpass after a big rain. We are on the way to fixing this. I don't think you're going to enjoy next summer so much, but go to the next slide. We have a grant that's going to enable us to put a new pumping station on the southeast corner of the railroad tracks in Deerpath. There's as you drive by there, you'll see a kind of a heavy vegetation site that will be turned into a pumping station, and we will pump the water. If you go to the, I think it's, why don't you get on one more slide, and I'll talk about both of these at the same time. we're going to pump water from the storm sewers under the Deerpath overpass across Deerpath from that pump station over to the, now that we have a little graphic, an arrow, there we go, into a retention pond on the golf course. As that fills up, there's another pipe that'll pump water across the golf course to another retention pond on the east side of the golf course. And as that fills up, then it will flow into the Skokie ditch, which runs parallel to the golf course. So all of that work will be done next year. And as I mentioned, there'll be some, we tried to do it so that if school is in session, that it doesn't disrupt the school bus schedule. So a lot of the construction work, I think, will be in the summer of next year. Again, I'm going to let Director Thomas comment on this, but the idea is that since Deerpath will have to be down to one lane for a number of weeks to enable us to get the pipe laid underneath, it will be a little bit of a traffic congestion. But Director Thomas?
You are correct. As of now, what we are hearing from the state, and again, the state is going to fund this project completely. It's about a $12 million project. They are at the point where they're hopefully going to be signing contract with their low bid contractor and hopefully can begin sometime next month. But you are correct as far as closing down Deerpath. We were very specific to the state saying, if that has to happen, which it does, to get this pipe across Deerpath, let's do it when Deerpath school is out, and they've got to get it done before Deerpath school starts up again. So they have got, basically, we told them June 15th to August 15th. If they need to go down to one lane, that's the time to do it. And they acknowledge that. That's part of their bid specification, their requirements that the contractors will follow. But the first part of this, as you noted, will be excavating those two ponds, excavating for the pump station. So there's going to be a lot of semi-traffic potentially over the winter months, but it's probably a better time to get those semis in and out of here than during the summer months. So, Chairman Morris.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. So that brings us to the last slide in our official presentation. Obviously, we're going to have questions and answers after this, and our city manager wishes compiling those, and he'll be the question moderator when we get to those. But we did have a presentation at the City Council from the Lake Forest Library in our recent City Council session. And I'm going to ask our city manager, who's been working with Catherine Lemmer at the library on the future of the library and how this project, how it will unfold. It's a quite complicated project. So why don't I let City Manager Wisher talk about the discussions and plans and where do we go from here?
Great, thank you very much, Alderman Morris. And in fact, I'm probably going to turn it over to Community Development Director, Kathy Zerniak, who has really been the city's point person on this. Kathy, are you with us?
I am. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Alderman Morris said, the library was before the City Council at their last meeting on October 19th to really introduce and give an overview of the work that has been going on for the last several years. The library board, library staff, and their consultants have done a lot of due diligence around how do we move the library forward. The library building obviously is an historic icon in our community. And like all of our historic buildings, it needs attention from time to time. And certainly it needs attention now. We all have seen the dome wrapped, but the library has really taken a comprehensive approach and has stepped back to ask the question, how do we best position the library going forward for the next 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? The library has done an assessment of the building. They have done some preliminary outreach with the community over the last couple of years. And they have begun to work with an architect and a campaign consultant to really establish a framework for both space discussions and discussions about how would we fund a library project going forward. The next steps, the library is now working on a timeline that they will share with the council and community, really to set out the vision for what are the next steps, what is the timing, where do we go from here. The library is also putting together a broad community engagement plan. As I mentioned, there have been a lot of discussions to a limited extent with the public, but going forward, the library will be doing outreach, and it will need to be done creatively, given really our inability right now to have the kind of large-scale workshops that have worked well with other projects. The library project will go before the Historic Preservation Commission for any activity involving restoration of the building, any proposed expansion of the building, changes to the overall site. That process is yet to come, and that will be the city's standard public review process, public hearing, and ultimately the library will also be coming forward to the city council with a proposed funding package, financial package to support this project. And we do expect that the library will come to the city council and request some support. We don't know exactly what form that financial support will take at this time, but the library does not have the ability to issue bonds, and the city does have that ability. So we are at the public portion of this project is just about to kick off. Again, there's been a lot of background work done, but I would expect that we all will be hearing a great deal about the library and its future in the coming months. And certainly city staff will continue to work very closely with library staff and the consultants. There are some very good and very in-depth discussions going on.
Well, very good. Thank you, Kathy and City Manager Wisha. That brings us to the end. I think if you go to the next slide, you'll see the there's a call-in number at the bottom of the slide, 847-810-3643, and you can click on Q&A as well. But Jason, do you want to? It looks like we have maybe 8 or 9 questions. So
sure, yeah. Thank you very much, Alderman Morris and Alderman Karas. Before we get to some of the questions that have been submitted during tonight's forum, we did receive one in advance of tonight's ward meeting, so I'll start with that. The question was, are there any drainage problems in Ward 1 being addressed in the upcoming year?
We've talked about the ravines. There aren't any storm sewer projects per se, although there is some, and I'm going to ask Director Thomas to comment on there are the storm sewer drainage in the streets where we're trying to separate the stormwater from the sewer water and relining those drains. But Director, comments on this?
Sure. In general, you are correct, Chairman Morris. One of the projects that we actually have going on currently is we refer to it as I&I repairs. So if in fact, and we have done smoke testing in a good part of Ward 1, where we actually will go ahead and put smoke into the sanitary sewer to see if any smoke comes out of the storm sewer. And we've done that a few years ago to see if there's any interconnects. We do not want stormwater going into the sanitary. Lo and behold, we obviously found multiple areas around the city where we had that. We have a project going on right now where we're actually making all of those repairs. So yes, you're correct. Manholes and catch basins, we're making sure those are all sealed up to minimize, if not eliminate, stormwater out of the sanitary sewer. The ravines as well are overall stormwater related projects. And Again, the final topic as far as stormwater in general, we updated our stormwater plan in 2019, and we do have a list of projects laid out for the coming years. So that is available on the city's website, and we're happy to talk to residents about their stormwater issues on their own properties. If they ever have needs, we're here to help them.
I think you mentioned to me when we had been talking about the Burr project that in the course of doing that project, there could be some relief on the east side of the railroad tracks. Is that fair to say?
It is from the standpoint of maintaining the heavy, or I should say reducing the heavy flows, and how that impacts the ravine behind Ravine Park and Willow. That really is where the environmental benefit on that specific ravine is going to come, where as I had noted, we're going to be able to hold a good amount of stormwater and take our time injecting it back into the storm sewer system when it's the storms have passed and the flows in the ravine have slowed down. We'll be able then to turn the pump on and put the water in.
Great. Okay, the next question is for Jennifer, right?
So the next question we received is asking specific to our ward, what challenges, concerns, or future projects are facing Ward 1?
Jennifer, you want to take a shot at that? I think we're in pretty good shape, frankly. The library is a big one, and we've talked about that, and we know that's going to take some time to work through, but we'd like to see that come to a conclusion. Jennifer, other thoughts?
Yeah, the other, of course, the beaches in the ward, and I think, staff will make some recommendations how to mitigate some of the anticipated issues with the bluff and protecting the seat wall, given the high levels of the lake right now. So we, definitely need to listen to staff and their recommendations on, a sustainable plan for years to come. The beach is, such an important asset to the city and the residents who use it.
Yeah, I would comment also, I'm picking on Director Thomas here, but the Public Works Department does a very sophisticated evaluation of our streets on an annual basis, where they have a consultant with a very high-tech truck with laser beams that drive around the streets and give us an evaluation of each street and what the condition of that is and what needs repair or not. And that guides us in either the total resurfacing of the streets in our ward or patching. And you've probably seen a lot of patching, which is a lot more cost effective, which we can do because of the evaluation that this equipment provides us. So that's been a big plus for efficient and economical maintenance of our streets this year.
One maybe additional item I would note as you're talking about streets, Alderman Morris, certainly addressing aging infrastructure is a challenge across the city, spanning all 4 wards. But one item that probably disproportionately impacts Ward 1 is addressing some of the deterioration in bridges that we've been experiencing. We just this year completed an outside independent assessment of all of our bridges in the community, and certainly on the far east side here in the first ward, we have some very historically and architecturally significant bridges, but they are beginning to show their age. And so certainly that's a topic of discussion that I think the city council will begin embarking on as soon as next month. But over the next few years, I think certainly we're going to need to see some increased investments in bridge restoration work.
That's a good point. Jennifer and I are going to have a conversation with some residents over by the Woodbine Bridge on Lake Road, which is one of the deteriorated bridges that's going to need replacement. So that is a topic of ongoing conversation.
Great. The next question that has come in is both a comment and a question from an audience member expressing concern over the McKinley housing development and specifically inquiring what the current status of the project is. And
well, we ask Kathy that question?
Yes, I was going to ask Community Development Director Zerniak to answer that for us.
Sure. Thank you. The phase 3 of the McKinley development, the status of that project is that we do anticipate a revised plan coming in. The developer did acquire the lot directly to the east. That lot has been the subject of considerable drainage issues. And by acquiring that, we haven't seen the plan, but we do expect that perhaps some of the drainage issues can be addressed more holistically for that entire area. Just as a bit of background, a number of years ago, this area was identified as an area that would really be of benefit to the city to convert from office to multifamily residential, with the goal, really two goals. The 3 office buildings that were in that location were Class C office buildings, or maybe that's being generous. There was some interest initially in demolishing those office buildings and reconstructing larger office buildings in this area. And prior plan commissions, prior ad hoc committees determined that it would be more appropriate to move office development to the west side of the railroad tracks in an effort to keep the traffic generated by those types of developments in that area, and to locate offices closer to businesses that could benefit from that location. At the same time, the Plan Commission recognized that over several decades, many of the apartments that used to be on the second floor over most of the buildings in the central business district had been lost. So there was some real interest in bringing additional residential units back into the central business district, near the train station, within walking distance to the library in Gorton, and to restaurants. The first phase of the project is complete. The second phase building is nearing completion. Some of the units are being built out. Certainly there's been a great deal of interest from residents and from some outside the community in those units. They have sold very quickly and have really benefited the community. So as for phase 3, we do expect a plan to be submitted. That area was discussed in the master plan as being a transition from the phase 1 and phase 2 buildings to the single family homes to the east. And the previous plan was not approved, really because it was determined not to provide an adequate transition. So when a new plan comes in, there will be additional public hearings, both before the Plan Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. We will certainly send notices to all those who have been involved in the process and have expressed interest to date. And I expect there will be a significant community discussion. The exact timing at this point is not known, but I do anticipate we will begin those discussions in the next 2 or 3 months.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we do have several additional written questions. We do have a caller as well. So being respectful of their time, I'm going to ask Assistant City Manager Mike Strong to pitch in the caller.
We do have one caller. Just one moment, please.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you for the great presentation. My question is, will any of the new gas lights, the LED gas lights in the gaslight project, be installed on South June Terrace due to the park project being completed?
Jennifer and Mike Thomas.
I was going to say that's probably a good question for Public Works Director Mike Thomas.
Yes, thank you.
So, I'm going to ask probably our Public Works Superintendent, Dan Martin. He's spearheaded that project, so I'm going to ask him to answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, I think I heard the question to be the gas lights, are they going to be done at South Park along June Terrace? And the question is that will be happening next summer. Right now, we are moving into the first ward. We're doing these gas light conversions along Illinois Road, starting at Stonegate and working our way west up Illinois, doing a couple on Sheridan, and then and also on Mayflower. And then they'll be heading over into the South Park area. So yeah, that will be included.
Two related points on the on gas lights that I neglected to mention. One is the illumination will be very similar to the gas light. So the LED light, it's not going to be any brighter than the gas light, and also it's going to be easier for the city to maintain because the smoke from the gas won't affect the globe, the glass globe. So there'll be less maintenance for the city on the glass globe. Does that answer your question?
We may have lost the caller, but I believe that did answer the question. So,
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
Great. So the next question, and I'll probably, hopefully, Kathy didn't go too far. What is the status of the Joytime property?
That's a good question, and Kathy can answer that. No.
Sure. Thank you. The Joytime property is located on Maywood, 50 Maywood, adjacent to South Park. It is a privately owned property. Certainly is a property that has a long time history of a family who served the community with the preschool that was located on the property. The Joytime School closed now a number of years ago, and the remaining family members are interested in selling that property. We have been working closely with the family members. As with any private property, the city cannot direct what will happen, but we have been considering a whole range of options, working with some potential interested developers of the site. The site is unusual in that it is very narrow. I believe it's 50 feet wide and 300 feet deep, so it doesn't lend itself very well to multiple units due to the difficulty of access. But we are exploring options. We've discussed whether it makes sense to have it be incorporated into South Park or whether there are some other options. So we are continuing to work with the homeowner, and we will likely be bringing some options forward to the city council in the near future for further discussion.
Kathy, thanks first of all for talking about how important the Joytime has been to the community since it I don't even know when it was established, but it's really been a preschool that's educated thousands of young Lake Foresters. Can you talk about the time frame at all for that? I mean, is it something that you think that the city, will hopefully with the homeowner resolve, in the next 4 to 6 months or 12 months?
Yes, we are in communication with the homeowner. She currently is having an additional study completed. I expect that once she finishes that, we will hear from her. My guess is that we're probably more in a time frame of perhaps 3 to 4 months for resolution. But again, it is a private property, so the city cannot mandate how it proceeds. But any development proposal, if it were to come forward, would certainly go through the normal public review process.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next, we have, first a comment commending Park Superintendent Chuck Myers and his staff for the renovation of South Park, something I would certainly echo as well. And that is followed by a question expressing concern over the proposed library expansion, specifically seeking assurance that the project will adhere to the city's historic preservation standards. I know that's something that Kathy addressed just a few minutes ago. The answer certainly yes. Kathy, anything you want to add further to the comments you've already provided on the process?
I would only add again that we are working closely with the library. The library staff, library board, and consultants have been open to input to date, and we would expect that process to continue, much as it does with various projects throughout the city.
I would say, let me just comment that I know that our mayor, Penn de Leon, and Jennifer and I are committed to that process. It's a wonderful asset for the community, and we have a lot of participation in the discussion, not only from our boards and commissions, but just from the public at large. And so I'm looking forward to quite a healthy process as we go forward.
Great, thank you. Next is both a comment and a question. Has the city ever considered encouraging the creation of a Ravine Homeowners Association through which homeowners could share information, coordinate work, and perhaps even create a fund to fund or borrow against for individual projects?
Good question. I haven't thought about that, and I'm the finance chairman, but maybe we should think about that.
Sure.
Kathy, or maybe Director.
Yep, I can have, actually, I'll have Jim Lockefear from our Public Works Department jump in a second, but I can note that I believe in the past, there has been some talk about establishing a special service area for Ravines to build a private fund for overall maintenance. I think there, as I understand it, admittedly predates me. There was little homeowner interest at the time, but certainly that's something that could be explored again. I'm going to have Jim Lockefear hop on here. Jim is our liaison or representative on the Lake Forest Collaborative for Environmental Leadership. I know they've done a lot of work looking at educating homeowners on private ravine maintenance. Jim, are you with us?
I am. Thank you, City Manager Wisha. And yes, that is correct. The city, as a member of the Lake Forest Collaborative for Environmental Leadership, worked on a few years ago with the other member agencies that include the school districts, Lake Forest College, and Open Lands, a brochure that is available on the city's website, specifically under the Environmental Initiatives page for homeowners specifically that own ravine property. And that brochure does feature those best management practices that were referenced in the question. And I will add too that we always strongly encourage any ravine property owner, if they would like to meet with city staff, to contact the Public Works Department. We are happy to come out to review any issues that you might have and offer recommendations based on our evaluation.
Great, thank you so much, Jim. The last question we currently have, is there any chance of resurfacing all of Sheridan, at least north of Deerpath Road?
Well, I think we.
Yeah, I was going to say probably a good question for our Public Works Director.
As Chairman Morris noted, we do a study every 3 years on all of our streets and parking lots. I have briefly seen the proposed list for next year, and I do not believe that Sheridan Road is on it. However, I can commit to the resident that asked the question. We will go ahead and take a closer look at Sheridan. And if in fact there are some areas that we can patch, we will do so. I know it isn't perfect. Sheridan is a challenging street, heavily traveled. We have a lot of heavier trucks on it. A lot of it does not have curb and gutter. So Sheridan takes a beating. I understand that. I acknowledge it. So we'll take a closer look at it. And if we can patch it up in the short term, we will, but we'll also look to long term to see how quickly we can get that on the list.
Yeah, Director, I travel on that road quite a bit. It's just behind my house, and there are those typical manhole depressions a lot on that section of. So maybe that's something you can take a look at to lift those manhole covers. There's not quite a thud when you go over them.
Okay, and we had noted that on Western Ave from Illinois to Ryan, I believe, that is a potential project for us to adjust those next year, but we'll go ahead and look at those on Sheridan as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And we actually have another caller. So I'm going to ask Communications Director Susan Banks to patch the caller in.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Amy Shute, and I live in the ward, and I just met both of you, the other day on another issue. But we just have a question. We have a group of us in the city that are concerned about the use of the gas-powered leaf blowers. That we seem to be the only community in the North Shore that does not regulate them other than a time issue during the day. And we're just wondering if maybe there's something that we could do to maybe at least have them not be used during the summer like Highland Park and some other areas do.
Nathan, you want to talk about that with
Yep, no question. That is a topic that has surfaced with some regularity in the community, and I'm actually going to ask Parks and Forestry Superintendent Chuck Myers to address this question. Chuck, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, that is an issue that we did dive deeply into back in a couple of years ago, and City Council had a number of discussions about it, and it was decided to change the hours a little bit, but that was it at the time. We did take a deep dive on it, and I know City Council also committed to revisiting it. We wanted to see how things have gone for a period of time and then revisit it. So I'm sure it is something that we'll be looking at again in the very near future as directed.
Amy, does that answer your question?
Sorry,
Okay.
we've lost her again, but I do think that has answered the question. So.
Okay. And I did meet with her, so I can follow up with her to make sure we did.
Very
I
good.
met with her on another issue in the ward.
Okay. Another question, a follow-up, perhaps to an earlier question. Does the city have any interest in purchasing the Joytime property? I think, I'll just note as a follow-up to the comments from Kathy Zerniak, certainly all options are being considered. I think it's a balance, for the city and respecting our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, but also hoping for, an appropriate resolution to the issue. So hard to say much more than that, other than, again, I think all options are certainly on the table at this point. We have a comment providing some suggestions on how to improve the call-in feature, and we appreciate the feedback. That is well noted and something we'll certainly take under advisement as we move forward with future meetings. At this time, that is all the questions we've received. Happy to give it another minute. If not, I will turn it back over to you, Alderman Morris and Alderman Karras.
Very good. Well, we'll wait for a minute, but thank you to everyone who participated. Jennifer, I wish we could have been there in Gorton in person to meet each of you and to engage in this conversation directly. But maybe next year. I certainly hope so with the improvement of vaccines and therapies and all those things that will be back in person next year. So don't hesitate to contact either myself or Jennifer if you have any concerns, questions. We'll try and work with the city staff to get those answers to you. So thank you very much, Jennifer.
And I echo that sentiment, Jed. It's really great to interact with our ward constituents in person. And I've had the wonderful opportunity to meet a number of them just in the neighborhood or, who have called or emailed on issues. So that's really sort of one of the greatest pleasures of being able to serve on city council. So as Jed indicated, don't ever hesitate to reach out to either of us, it's something you're concerned about or a question or just to say hello, frankly.
Yeah, and I just comment a big thank you from the ward to our city staff, to Jason, to public safety folks, the park and rec, all the people that maintain the streets and trucks and everything out there. You guys do a great job, and we certainly appreciate your service to the community. So thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
And I think unless we have any call-ins, I think that will be it for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.